people imagine that being psychic is something odd, something weird, a characteristic that has absolutely nothing to do with the real world. They think it's like sprouting some strange appendage which doesn't belong to the human being at all. This concept is totally false. The truth, as myself and the other researchers here from the Interworld Congress can attest to, is that being psychic is simply the activation of an individual's intuitive perception. It's the center out of which we gain an understanding of what this world is really about. The psychic isn't outside reality, it reveals reality. The Interworld Congress, a Judeo-Christian parapsychological research fellowship, has been exploring psychic phenomena for the past 18 years and applying the results of these explorations to every area of human experience, to medicine, crime, communication and the arts, to name just a few. For us, being psychic is a means of discovering solutions to the unresolved problems of our world. It's a perspective.
Hi, my name is Robin Nightingale. Welcome to the Psychic Perspective. Today we will be exploring the definition of the word psychic and how that word contrasts to the word occult. So often these terms are used interchangeably in this field, and as we will discover today, that usage is often incorrect. We will from there determine what then we actually mean by the psychic perspective and how that term is applied in the world in which we live. On my left is William MacMillan. On my right is Karen Wescott and Laura MacMillan. What is the definition of the word psychic?
The psychic is an awareness, and I think it's important for people to know that the word psychic comes from the Greek word psyche, meaning soul, so that it is pertaining to the soul.
Specifically from our perspective, being Judeo-Christian, we're quite interested in the soul and the way the soul can be released to be able to be creative. And the way that can happen is for the soul to be released from tyranny that may be perpetrated upon it. In doing that, we would have a perspective to function in life, and that's a whole approach of being able to get into life and live it.
That's true. If the true power in the world is the power to be able to see beyond the facade, to see under and around and through, then the person who is psychic can never be tyrannized, can never be intimidated, because they're always able to pierce through that force which is trying to trap them, trying to limit them, trying to deny the true potential that's there. Too often today, psychic is confused with mind, and it is the word psychic, as you said, is bandied about with the word occult, and all the terms in this field are too often interchangeable when in fact they may be at direct opposites.
Oh, really? How is the word occult opposite to the word psychic?
Well, by definition, occult means something hidden, something mysterious. Stuart Edward White, who wrote a series of books called the Betty Books about his wife, who was psychic and who went into deep trance and brought through a number of messages, which are very apropos for us today, he said that all progress is a process of de-occultization, that the radio at one time would have been considered occult, mysterious. But once the process of the dynamic, which brought the radio as a discovery into usage in our world, it no longer was occult, because now it was open. The psychic is what's open. The psychic, as I said, reveals reality. It doesn't try to hide it. It isn't something you have to be initiated into, as is in so many occult societies, ancient and present. We like to define specific faculties of perception that we feel are under the broad term psychic. One of those terms is clairvoyance, which means seeing clearly, clear vision. Clairaudience, which means hearing clearly. Clairsentience, which means experiencing emotionally, clearly. Retrocognition, being aware of the past. Precognition, being aware of the future. Prophecy, being able to receive a vision and put it out and have that come to pass. Prophecy being something of the spirit of a divine inspiration to make something good come about for humanity.
These are all psychic terms.
These are all psychic terms, dreams and visions,
Uh-huh.
things which will give us an awareness. Under the occult, we group the terms meditation, which is a focus of concentration rather than awareness of what is coming to a person.
I mean, it's a projecting
It
outward.
is a projecting outward.
Specifically directed meditation.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Not to be confused with receptive prayer.
I
People
see.
do often, the old term meditation in the ancient Greece and ancient Hebrew peoples meant a prayer. But today it's becoming a directed mental concentration, which has nothing to do with actual receiving.
I see.
Telepathy, which is probing outward to discover what somebody is thinking. Many people who are psychic will receive other people's thought impressions, but they are not probing for them. They're receiving them because they are sensitively picking up on them, experiencing them. Another term is...
I mean, what you would say, then psychic is actually what is coming to you as opposed to what
That's
you're putting
right.
out, which
the
would be
psychic
more
opens
occult.
up their hands and says, let me receive what I need for today.
Right.
Let me be open and receptive to you. The person who is the occult is saying, let me discover who you are, but I'm not necessarily going to take you in or let you know who I am.
I see.
I'm going to bore a hole through you. But in that sense, the person who's in the occult can only, to use a term, read what is actually being thought by the other individual, can actually only read what that individual is consciously projecting and not what is going on underneath, inside, in the soul, which is why we use psychic from the Greek term psyche, meaning soul, because it is the soul, the actual recording of the experiences of an individual's life that is the essence of what that person is. It's not what's going on in the mind. And today, too many of the disciplines are focused on the mind. And in that sense, we're all being thoroughly deceived because it's just one imitation and projection relating to another imitation and projection.
So when you are, let's say, taking on another person or a character, you are indeed picking up their emotional state more so than their thought process.
That's true. You may be picking up all at the same
I
time,
see.
but generally you don't pick up only the thought process. You will pick up the physical condition, the emotional state. You may pick up the aspirations that have been hidden, that were present at an early age and then covered up as society conditioning came in or as parents wanted to lead somebody into a particular direction. But I do just want to finish the other
Yes.
terms. We have under the occult meditation, telepathy. We have psychokinesis or telekinesis, which are interchangeable, which is the concentration of energy to move objects. The Russians have done quite a bit of experimentation with this.
Is that the kind of work that Uri Geller is known for?
Yes, bending spoons. And it is an energy that has no perception. It has no... its purpose is not to nurture or to make an individual grow. Its purpose is like a laser beam in a sense. Whatever it's going to hit, whatever is in its path is going to get affected by that energy, very often to the detriment of a human being. If this energy can bend a spoon, could it not pierce a heart?
Indeed.
In a sense, it has no awareness. It has it's directed outward. In that focus, it's a weapon. It can become a weapon because it is so directed. It is so piercing. There's nothing to respond to when you have a one-line focus. You can't sit back and say, wow, I'm experiencing this, and then reflect on it and operate on it, take an action. When it's directed, as in telekinesis or directed meditation, the concentration, this isn't the face of the happiness that you experience in meditation that people put out, but the actual concentration coming from the third eye is very intense like that. And if I were in this state and performing this, there's nothing that I could be responsive to on all sides of me because
I
the
see.
focus is so strong.
You mean you can't be projective and receptive at the same time? Or alternately?
Not in the state of the occult, no.
No, you can't project and receive
At the same time?
at the same time.
But you can switch?
But you can respond. And that's the difference. When we work quite a bit in counseling, as you know, And as we are responsive psychically to the troubles and the problems that are going on in an individual or in a couple or in a family, we will be speaking to those people. And from an outsider's point of view, it may seem as though we're projecting our thoughts outward. But in essence, we are responding to unspoken questions that are coming from the individuals themselves. So we are at the same time receiving and responding to what we are receiving. But we're not projecting out our philosophies or our thoughts or our opinions. Now, most people would have to take that on faith until they actually experienced it in interaction, because for me to say that is, you have to take my word on that. Until you see how the human being is really made to be responsive and receptive. We're all part of a great universal switchboard in that sense. We're all plugged into each other as long as we pay attention to it. To go back for a moment to the Russian experiments, they've been working with transmitting states of emotion to other people. What they will do is place the sender in one city and the receiver in another city. Now, the receiver knows during a certain time of the day he's going to receive something. He doesn't know what. And, of course, they vary what they're going to send. These particular experiments were written up in Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. But in one case, they began sending states of depression, suicidal states. The sender would focus on how terrible the receiver was going to feel. He better commit suicide. He better kill himself. Life was hopeless. Life was despairing. There was no use in living. And the receiver did report becoming terribly emotionally upset and had to be counseled after these experiments took place because the effects were long-lasting. Now, the receiver was lucky in the sense that he knew he was a receiver. Mm-hmm. And the psychic who starts becoming aware of their own psychic mechanism is lucky because they start becoming aware when that's being projected at them, whether consciously or inadvertently. Mm-hmm. Whether somebody is thinking for their own good, they'd like this person to leave a group or to leave a situation, or, gee, I hope they don't date so-and-so, and they're sending it out and sending it out without realizing that it is hitting that person. And the individual who it is hitting may start thinking, well, gee, I don't really like so-and-so. Well, gee, I don't really want to be here. When in essence, maybe they do want to be there. But the control is so intense that they start acting on that without becoming aware that that is not their desire at all.
So indeed, this is going on every day of our lives and to every one of us unconsciously.
That's right. On every level, however subtle it may be.
That's very important that we do become
very
aware.
important, and this is really why psychology developed and psychoanalysis developed. But because, unfortunately, the fields of psychiatry and psychoanalysis don't really utilize the intuitive and the psychic perception. It takes far longer than it need take to discover where the influences are, where the human being needs to be freed to become what that child originally dreamed of becoming.
I see.
And in this sense, the way we counsel people, in a 2-hour session, we will probably uncover what may take months, sometimes years, for a psychiatrist to uncover.
So what, if you were to give a definition, or I think you probably have already, of what exactly the psychic perspective is as it applies to our everyday lives, how would you sum that up for me?
Will, do you want to say something on that? Perhaps you might discuss in terms of our work with coma and...
Well, we were in on the Karen Ann Quinlan case. Karen Ann Quinlan, 24 hours after she was admitted to the hospital in coma, the priest from the Roman Catholic Church was in wanting to pull the plugs on her. That's, first of all, should be unheard of concerning the Catholic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church, that is. And secondly, as a right to life, because everyone has the right to life. What we perceived about that case psychically is that Karen was actually sending herself out from a very deep soul level to anyone who could be responsive to her because she had been treated as a victim in her soul. A crime had been committed against her as far as she was concerned. And she needed someone to be responsive to that, to see that that was her state and that she could communicate out of that state. We were living in Virginia Beach at the time, and we got impressions of her, and we went immediately up to where they were having the trial. And when we got in there, most of us were not allowed into the courtroom. I was lucky. I got by somehow. And to see what was going on in the courtroom, you would have thought that Karen Quinlan was on trial for being in coma. Not that they were there to help her, but that in fact she was the one who had perpetrated something against society. And in a sense she has, but not that it is criminal. What she has perpetrated is a cry for help that comes from many people. And we kept putting out that we would like to be able to go in, that we felt that we could get a response from her, specifically through her hands, through a contact. Cameras could come in if they wanted to. And no one responded. No one wanted to know. The priest, Father Trapasso, did not want to know. Her parents did not want to know. In fact, we went out to the hospital where she was. And the day we were there, the parents were coming in and out of the doors being posed to look distraught for the New York papers. And as soon as the pictures were over, of course, everybody was nice and happy and it was joyful. And then another picture-taking session, oh, they had to look distraught concerning Karen. Well, gee, this poor girl, if this is what she's living with concerning this kind of a family and who's supposed to care for her, it's no wonder they wanted to pull the plug.
It's been very interesting that in many cases, such as Tony Conigliaro, a case also of a young fellow who was in coma, whose mother wrote a book called David about him, where the families fought tooth and nail, practically against the medical profession, to insist that their children or their relatives were going to come out, to treat the relatives as though they were conscious, as though they were aware of what was going on, to give them input and to give them the support physically and verbally and psychically that they needed. These people pulled out. In fact, the doctor who takes care of Tony Conigliaro was almost offended that his diagnosis had been wrong. Now, you know, I think that's unfortunate. I'm not putting down the whole medical profession or anything like that, because there are many, many medical people open to this. But we need to see life where others see death.
Yes.
We need to go to look for the opportunity to rescue and revive and revitalize the seeds of potential that are there, no matter how dismal the situation becomes.
Right. We need to have a psychic
That
perspective.
is the psychic
right.
perspective.
Exactly. That's beautiful. I understand that you have some demonstrations for us in our remaining few moments, perhaps.
Well, we do, but just before we get into that, I'd like to make a comment on some of what's going on in the world today concerning a psychic perspective in the arts. Most recently, the two films that have been released, Poltergeist, which many people think, oh, there's a psychic film, we have to go see it and be terrified, and also E.T., something that's from outer space that is supposedly also psychic, and how that could be responded to. I would like to say first that I was offended by both films. E.T., I walked out totally angry, not just because of the psychic perspective, but because of the distortion of truth that was in the film. I thought there was a total manipulation of emotions, so that people walk out feeling something because they are experiencing a reality of emotions, but there is a distortion in terms of what actually exists, so that they are being made to feel something not on the basis of what they are seeing, but what is set up.
You mean, so indeed there is an emotional state being projected upon them.
There's an emotional state that is familiar, that they are in need of, that is being represented in the film. They are responding to the need in themselves of what they want to see, and filling in gaps that the director and the writer have left in the film. That's with E.T.
And what's wrong with that? I mean, why wouldn't that be a good thing, let's say?
Well, because it would set up in any individual, almost telepathically, for that individual not to be responsive, first of all, to another human being. It distorts fear that an individual already has, and would open them up to an entity, or a foreign entity, that would have nothing to do with wanting to help them or interact with them. In other words, it places them out of the realm of human interaction.
It kind of took away the authority from people in the film, because the E.T. oftentimes was given more credibility than the people in terms of having the compassion and understanding of others. And the people were, for instance, in one of the final scenes, one of the final hospital scenes, when the hospital staff was trying to cure the ET of whatever illness he was going through, the little boy was screaming, and it seems almost unjustifiably. It's like he went in there with the idea that the medical staff was going to be destructive rather than of any help at all. And I don't know where the boy would have had that impression. I mean, there was no other indication of him maybe having a bad experience in the hospital previous to that, so it almost looked like he just had almost a bias going into the hospital, assuming that the medical staff couldn't help the ET. And
in that sense, I felt the entire film set up a series of suspicions which were never justified in the film. The focus on the man with the keys, and even at the beginning when we heard the ET screaming as a trapped animal, our sympathies immediately went to that being, although we weren't sure what it was that was pursuing him. The ET could have as well been a Charles Manson being pursued, having that same torturous cry, and there was never a justification really set up, even in terms of the ending where the government and the military would have taken the ET away to study him. That was an impression that was intensified and, in a sense, exploited our own already suspicious society of authority, of the military, of the government. And I did not feel that in terms of the film it made that justification. So it set up what position we were going to be on without really giving us the solid substance for having that position.
In that sense, a total manipulation
of our emotional state.
Because we could have felt the same way for a Charles Manson or indeed a Hitler from that film. I mean, E.T. could have been a Hitler and we would have been made to feel sorry.
Sympathetic.
And for a lot of people, that sets up a whole idea in their heads about how they would respond in that situation outside of the film, with a mistrust of people.
Plus, again, you see, it was the child who was psychic. The child absorbed the E.T. creature. He took him on. The E.T. never absorbed the child. The E.T. projected. And in that sense, it sets up human beings to be ready to be controlled, whether by a good or a bad force, but they don't really have the awareness to know whether it's a positive or a negative force that's coming in. Because very often it will masquerade as something soothing, something calming, but not something that makes you aware, that makes you grow, that gives you a creative potential to fulfill.
If there's one thing the E.T. really isn't, it's not a father figure. There was a father that was obviously missing in the film that was trying to introduce from a Freudian perspective.
That's true.
We only have a few moments left. Would you like to do a demonstration, or would you like to go on and discuss a little bit more on the subject?
We'll get to the demonstration. I just wanted to say that in terms of poltergeist, the distortion there was that there could never be an overcoming. And anytime you set that up in a society of young people specifically looking at this film, you are preparing them for a fear that they can never succeed in this world. And in that sense, I think that the film is a travesty upon the souls of young people.
People forget that all the old Vincent Price horror films, of course, they weren't planning on sequels at that time. Today seems to be the going thing. The evil did not win out. You didn't walk away. You may have nightmares because the evil was so incarnately evil, but there was always a resolve. So that somewhere you could say, "Well, they got him,"
There's some redeeming value.
So the child in all of us could say, "Wow, we can grow up without the fear."
There's a way to overcome.
That's right. By the way, I'm a director of what we call psychic repertory theater. And in that, we do different kinds of improvisation. And some of what becomes revealed to us, even concerning things like poltergeist and E.T., is through what we call the psychic improvisation, which is basically utilizing psychometry. Psychometry is being able to take objects or billets of paper in your hand and being able to absorb the vibration off of that billet into yourself and then performing it out melodramatically most of the time and with flair, hopefully, depending upon what the reading is, so that we can discover what interaction there is between two different things. Now, mostly we use it in counseling between people so that we know what people are. But today I'd like to give a demonstration, and I'd like to use one as a personal thing with people, and another one just to discover what a relationship is between two broad things that you'll see revealed after we do the reading.
Okay.
Let me just write them up.
Are there any other comments while Will is writing up these readings?
I would like for a moment to just go back to our discussion in terms of working with people in coma, because we are beginning a research project called Project Breakthrough, and we'll be soliciting information and experiences from people who have or who have friends and family who have come out of coma, and what exactly was the
I'm
result
sorry,
of
I'm
that.
going to have to interrupt you. Our time is just about over.
Oh, all right.
I think we'll have to perhaps save these readings for another segment. If you want to just finish your comment, and then we'll close.
Okay, I was going to say that very often people will think it's better for the person to die, and so they will even pray for the person. We've even had an ex-minister praying for his daughter to die because he was afraid if he didn't, maybe he was going against God's will. And we said to him, if God wants to take her, you know, he'll take her.
Right.
But you pray for life, because that's what she needs, is someone to support her.
That's right.
And finally she did come out of coma and went against all the medical diagnosis that she would be crippled and paralyzed, and she went through physical therapy, and she's a fine young lady today.
Wonderful. We do have to close now. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I think it's been a very enlightening session. And if anyone in our audience would like to write in with questions or comments or a desire to see a particular subject matter discussed on a future segment, I urge you to do so. You can write The Psychic Perspective, Post Office Box 480306, Los Angeles, California 90048. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry we didn't have time to do those readings. Let's do that one.
Well, that's